Welcome to the series on how to EQ like a pro. In this series, we're going to talk about a lot of different parameters when it comes to EQ. First, we're going to talk about types of EQs and the most common ones. Then we're going to talk about EQ tips that pros use, as well as myself. And we're also going to get into mid-side EQ and some other various topics. So before we get going, let's talk about what EQ actually is. In music production, equalization, also known as EQ, is the process of altering sound frequencies to enhance your overall mix. The human ear can hear 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz. You might commonly see equalization on your home stereo or your car stereo, also known as low, mid, or mid-range, and high, or commonly known as bass, mid, and treble. The frequency spectrum can be broken up into different categories. These are rough estimates, but to give you an idea of where each of these categories sit. The lows usually sit between 20 hertz and 150 hertz, roughly. Low mids roughly sit between 150 hertz to 600 hertz. The mids, or the mid-range, sits roughly between 600 hertz and 1.5 kilohertz, or 1500 hertz. The upper mids sit roughly between 1.5 kilohertz to 6 kilohertz, or 1500 hertz to 6000 hertz. And then your highs sit between 6 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz, or 6,000 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Corrective EQ is used to fix problems that occur in the recording process or with anything that might be needed to correct a problem. Enhancement EQ is something everyone does, used to enhance something that is there or carve space between sounds, therefore to lift them into the mix or to give them a sense of space in the overall frequency spectrum. Now we're going to get into the different various types of EQs that you can find. Shelving EQ affects the frequencies above or below a certain point. It is most commonly used when you want to boost the high end or low end of a track without completely cutting it off. Let me give you an example. On this EQ here from Pro Tools, it's automatically set to shelf on the low frequency and the high frequency. You can see that by this little button here. So if I was to boost or cut this is a common example of your stock basic shelving EQ. This is what is most commonly being used when you are using your basic car stereo EQ or your home stereo EQ. You're just giving that shelf a boost or a cut. Okay, the next type of EQ that you're going to most commonly see is a high or low pass, also known as a high or low cut. So, let's discuss. This type of EQ will only eliminate frequencies and not boost anything. A high pass filter will allow the highs to pass through while cutting out the lows at a specified point, also known as a low cut filter. And vice versa, a low pass filter will cut out the highs at a specified point, which is also known as a high cut. These types of EQs act as a roll-off, meaning that they gradually roll off the frequencies at a certain point, but most EQs can adjust this setting with the Q value. One of the most common uses for an EQ of this type is to roll off, say, for example, low-end rumble, or if you wanted to cut out some fret noise, or just take out frequencies above or below a certain point. Let's take a look at what these look like. If you look at the stock EQ on the Pro Tools, you automatically have a high pass and a low pass filter right here. So if I was to turn this on, and then you can adjust the Q value here, and if I bring the frequency up, you see that this is a high pass, also known as a low cut. And I'm just basically eliminating all the frequencies in this gray area, and I can control the slope with this knob here. And the same goes for the high cut, or also known as the low pass, on this one. Now, you can do the same thing with the fab filter. If I want to just do a low cut, there it is, and then I get the slope setting here. Notice the fab filter has a lot more options, as well as a brick wall setting, which is pretty unique. And then if I wanted to do the same thing, I can choose a high cut, or also known as low pass, and I can brick wall that as well. I would advise to be careful when doing such a sharp cut like that. It is more common to do more of a gradual slope when using these types of filters. Now, I did do a video on the myth about high passing everything except your kick and your bass. And if you're curious to know about that, you might want to check out that video. I'll leave you a link up above. Okay, the next most common type of EQ is known as the graphic EQ. I've got one pulled up here, which is the API 560. This type of EQ is very familiar in a live setting. You see the racks with a lot of bands and the sliders that move up and down. Each of those sliders represents a band, and you can boost or cut each band respectively. So here is an example of the API 560, and as you can see, I've got different frequencies here listed, and if I was to boost or cut, this is going to give the signal the same type of situation. Now, one of the things about this EQ particularly is it's very colorful. The APIs have a lot of nice color, and that's one of the things we're going to discuss later in this series. Okay, the next most common type of EQ, and probably the most common type of EQ found in music production, is the parametric EQ. The parametric EQ can be used in a lot of different applications because you can use it surgically to remove things, or you can use it numerous different parameters, hence the name parametric. This is the most common type of EQ in music production, and you will find that you can use it for not only corrective EQ, but also enhancement EQ. What you can do with a parametric EQ is control the bandwidth of the boost or the cut with the Q setting. The Q setting can get so narrow that you can actually use it very surgically if you need as well. So let's take a look at some examples here. Here we have a parametric EQ sitting at 1000 Hertz. And here's the Q and here's the gain, so the boost or the cut. If I boost this, you're gonna see that I'm gonna get a type of parametric enhancement. And as you can see with the Q, I can control the level of that boost, how much I'm getting in that range. And then same vice versa if I cut. If I wanted to surgically remove something as a corrective EQ, I can basically turn it into a notch type of EQ, which we'll discuss later. But as you can see, this is a very surgical move here. So parametric EQs are very handy because you can sweep around the frequency spectrum like so, you can widen the Q, you can narrow the Q, and you can do a boost or a cut. So if you're gonna be doing something more broad, say an enhancement, you'd probably have a Q that's more of a wider type of bump, if you wanna call it, or a hill or a hump. I've heard people call it that. But this is more of a broad type of EQ setting. And then vice versa, if you're going to be doing something more corrective, you're probably going to be getting a little bit more narrow, if not very surgical, like so. So parametric EQs is one of the most common type of EQs you're going to find in music production. As you can see here with the fab filter, it's already set to bell. This is also known as a bell type EQ. And I get the same features here as I do with the Pro Tools stock EQ as well. So you can scroll around the frequency and you can boost or cut, you can narrow or widen the Q. Okay, the next most common type of EQ is a bandpass EQ. Bandpass EQs are very common in live applications as well as in synthesis when designing sounds. You might use a bandpass EQ to notch out certain areas of the mid-range. Bandpass EQs typically only affect mid-range, however you can use them to control areas in the lows and the highs as well. Now some people use bandpass EQs to hone in on a specific frequency range of an EQ. Now for example, the Pro Tools EQ here does not have a bandpass option, but if you were to hold Control-Shift on a Mac and then select the EQ, you get the bandpass option here. And as you can see, as I'm holding that, I get a bandpass filter where I can move the frequency around or widen and increase that Q size. Now, if you take a look at the fab filter, I do have the option as a bandpass where it stays permanent. And the beautiful thing is you can control the width with the Q or the frequency. And this is what I meant where you can literally bandpass the lows or the highs. So you just get certain areas of the frequency spectrum. So bandpass EQs are very unique. You might, like I said, use that in a live application where you want to filter out a lot of the frequency spectrum in something. Maybe you want to shape the tone of something with a bandpass EQ, or vice versa. You might want to do the same thing with synthesis. You also have the ability here to adjust the overall bandpass itself, so the shape of it. So there's a lot of options here with the FabFilter Pro Q3. Last but not least, the FabFilter Pro Q3 gives you some additional EQ settings that most EQs don't, including a notch filter, a tilt shelf, and a flat tilt. I'm not going to get into the details of this in this video since this is not the most common EQ types, but once again, I do have a tips and tricks video on Uncommon FabFilter Pro Q3 tips that I'll leave you a link up above where I discuss these types of EQ settings. And that's an overview on the different types of EQ you can use in your music productions. If you have any questions, shoot me a comment down below. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and the bell notification will keep you up to date. Once again, my name is Freddie from Distinct Mastering, and have a great day.